Okay. Hi, everybody. Miriam Tawil, and I'm so happy to be with you on Zoom today at this very special SCA pre-Yom Haasmaut Day. Um, Israel is about to celebrate its 72nd birthday on Tuesday night and Wednesday. But before we get started on our topic today, which is the religious significance of Eretz Yisrael, I do want to mention that today's SCA and Tanach Study Day of Learning is sponsored in the memory of Mr. Stanley Chera A Shalom by the Chera family. May our learning be a merit. Okay, so we're going to get started today. I have a lot to do. This is a topic that's very near and dear to me, as most of you know. And I'll just start with my personal story before getting to the purpose of this class. My family and I, we moved to Israel, I guess it's now 13 years ago. And part of the reasons that we moved to Israel have a lot to do with the class today. The religious significance of Israel. My husband and I both felt that in order to live the fullest Jewish religious lives that we wanted to live, that we wanted to be here in Eretz Yisrael, and we considered it a tremendous privilege to be able to. On another Zoom class, we can talk about all the ups and downs and difficulties of Aliyah and all of that, but we'll leave that for another time. And I also want to mention that in our beloved Midrashah, in Midrash Eress, the idea of Eretz Yisrael being front and center. It's front and center without us like waving flags every day, but just there's like an understanding that Eretz Yisrael is a central part of who we are, and it's a central part of our Torah mitzvot, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So we'll be looking at it from a number of different perspectives, but basically trying to understand and appreciate the great importance of this miracle, and I'm using that word very carefully, the miracle of Eretz Yisrael. We're going to be looking at the centrality of Eretz Yisrael in both our practice, in our belief, in our history, and we're going to try, if we can, hopefully at the end, to figure out ways that we can really integrate Israel into our lives, even if we're not living there. Okay, so with that, let's get started. I have a lot of sources, but we'll see how many we actually get to. Well, we can start actually with the very first pasuk on the Torah, the very first Rashi, which may be familiar to some of you. That on the first pasuk of the Torah, where it says "Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz," in your source sheet, the very first one, Rashi has a very interesting comment where he says, "Amar b'Yitzchak lo yatzarich latchil haTorah ela mechodesh hazeh lachem." The first words of the Torah should have been the first mitzvah, the mitzvah of the first month of the year, Nisan. Shehi mitzvah rishona shenitztabo Yisrael. Uma ta'am patach beReshit. Why did the Torah begin with Bereshit according to Rashi? Mishum koach masav higid lamo latet lahem nachlat goyim. Quoting a pasuk there from Tawil that says that God is the one who is in charge of the entire world, and God is the one who can decide who gets what. She'im yomru umot ha'olam Yisrael listimatem shekavashtem artzot shivat hagoyim hem omrim lehem kol haaretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu hi. So if it comes a point in time in history where we might be confronted with the nations of the world telling us, this isn't your land. By the way, does this sound familiar to anybody? We're going to be able to say, no, God is the creator of the universe, and he decided who he's going to give what lands to. And Eretz Yisrael is our land, and we shouldn't doubt our ownership of this land. As it says at the end of the explanation, God gave the land to who he saw fit. So God gave the land to us. And that's something that the first Rashi of the Torah comes to tell us, that we have to be very secure in knowing the fact that we are privileged to own and to be the nation that belongs in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, if we look a little bit further on our source sheet, we look at the next source number 2. We see that the very first mitzvah that was given to the very first Jew, Abraham Avinu, was go to Israel. ויאמר השם אל אברהם, source number 2, לך לך מארצך וממולדתך מבית אביך אל הארץ אשר אראך. ואעשך לגוי גדול, ואברכך. והגדל שמך ויהיה ברכה. So Abraham is told, this is very famous, everybody knows that Abraham was told to leave his birthplace and to come to Eretz Yisrael. And if you notice, by the way, Hashem says, I'm going to make you into a great nation, and you're going to be a blessing to all the people. I want you to just hold on to this thought. We're going to come back to it later on in the shiur about this idea of Eretz Yisrael helping us to become the nation that we need to be in order to have the rest of the world be blessed. So that is in Lech Lecha, in Bereshit Yud. Okay, so we see so far the first Rashi on the Torah is about Eretz Yisrael belonging to the Jews. It's our response to the nations of the world. We saw the very first mitzvah that's given to Abraham is Lech Lecha. Now we come to another purpose that we actually just read in our Haggadah, another purpose for Eretz Yisrael. Again, we're looking for this religious significance of Eretz Yisrael. Why is it so important to us? So we just read in Pesach, in the Haggadah, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, not just for the purpose of freeing us from slavery. Yes, it was very important, 100%. But in addition to freeing us, there was a purpose. There was a purpose in taking us out. And that purpose was none other than to get us to Eretz Yisrael. Now, there was a purpose after that as well, which we're going to talk about more. But look at the next source in source number 3. Va'ered lehatzilo. Hashem is speaking. I went down to save them, to save Bnei Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim. Ulehaloto min ha'aretz hahi el eretz tova urechava el eretz zavat chalav udvash. El makom ha'knani ha'chaiti ha'amori ha'pisi ha'chivi ha'yevusi. God says, I went down in order to take Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. For what purpose? Not just to free them and say, let them go, but to take them to this particular land that is a zavat chalav udvash, flowing with milk and honey. This is a very familiar description of Eretz Yisrael. So again, the purpose of Yetziat Mitzrayim, even as we understood just now after Pesach, was so that we could get to Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, we're going to be able to become the nation that we're supposed to be. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I just want to go a little bit further, see if we can get a few more sources in before we enlarge the discussion. If you look in source number 4, it should be familiar to everybody because it's the second beracha of Birkat HaMazon. In the second beracha of Birkat HaMazon, we find something very interesting. The order seems to be a little bit backward in the sense that first we mention Eretz Chemda Tova Rechava, then we mention Al Shotzitanu Meretz Yisrael, and then we mention Al Tovatcha Shema Tanu. In other words, if you look at the bracha, the first mention is Eretz Yisrael, whereas we would think that maybe the first mention should be taking us out of Mitzrayim. So what's with this order, and why is it in this particular order? So what the bracha shows us is that essentially what we're doing is we're thanking Hashem for for the ultimate goal first. The ultimate goal that we have here is to thank God for getting to Israel so that we can observe the Torah. That's first and foremost. Everything else was the means to that. So we thank Hashem for the ultimate goal first, that the purpose of Yetziat Mitzrayim again was to enter Eretz Yisrael for the purpose of observing the Torah. So here we see from our Birkat HaMazon, and there are so many places where we could mention other examples, but because we're short on time, the centrality of Eretz Yisrael. You cannot go 2 steps in your observance of Torah mitzvot without encountering the centrality of Eretz Yisrael. And it's part of it's what is going to help us get to our national mission. Okay, I think I want to jump just for the sake of time. You know what? If we can jump down, I want to just skip a few of these and see. Let's see if we can get to the Ramban. The Ramban, if you jump down, it's source number 11. There's actually 2 number 11s. I accidentally enumerated them. The second number 11, the mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. We come to a very, very interesting discussion Ramban brings to us. Ramban brings to us when he talks about, he's giving his commentary on Sefer Vayikra and in Parak Yudchet, and he's talking about what is the purpose of mitzvot outside of Israel. And this is a very interesting discussion. Why do we observe mitzvot outside of Israel according to Ramban? He has a very, very, really radical opinion, I think. Radical in the sense that it's something that not many people may have heard, I don't know. But he basically says, and we're going to look at it inside, he talks about this idea that the whole purpose of fulfilling the mitzvot outside of Israel is really to be well-versed and practiced so that when we get to Eretz Yisrael, we'll know what to do. So this is really quite interesting. I'm sorry, go to number 12. We skipped number 11, just briefly. Number 11, Ramban Nun, he enumerates as one of the 613 mitzvot, the mitzvah to live in Israel. Rambam, on the other hand, has a different opinion, which is debated, whether or not he did or didn't think living in Israel was a separate mitzvah. Before we go to number 12, we have been commanded to settle the land and not to leave it in the hands of other nations. And it's a positive commandment for all generations, and everyone is bound by it. So according to the opinion of Ramban Nun, it's an actual mitzvah to live in Israel, but we're going to leave that aside for now. Let's go to number 12. What is the purpose of the mitzvot in exile? So we back up and we say that we know that the idea that the Jews were kicked out of their land, right? The idea that the Jews were dispersed, right? The second temple was destroyed, and then eventually everybody went all over, and there isn't a country in this world that the Jews haven't been to. But the idea of being in exile is a punishment, and that's how the Nevi'im describe it. The idea of being kicked out of our land is a punishment. So here in Devarim, the pasuk is explaining, even though I have exiled you from the land to dwell outside it, you're going to be distinguished in some way. How are you going to be distinguished in some way from the other nations where you settle? By doing the mitzvot. And what is the purpose of doing these mitzvot? So that when you return, they won't be new to you. And if we jump to the bottom for a second, what's the purpose of all the mitzvot the Ramban concludes that are done in Chutz La'aretz? The essence of all the commands is for those who reside in Eretz Yisrael, meaning if we want to really observe mitzvot to the fullest according to Haramban, then the main place to do it is in Eretz Yisrael. But what? While we're in Galut, while we're not in our land, we still have to practice them, and we have to do them because this is part of not forgetting them and being ready to observe them as soon as we come back. So, and he gives an analogy here, which he says the analogy is like a husband who's it's not so relevant to us today, but the idea of a husband who's angry at his wife and he sends her back to her father's house, and he says, keep wearing your jewelry so that when you return, they won't be new to you. Okay, so here Ramban does something very amazing where he says that there's a qualitative difference to doing the mitzvot in Chutz La'aretz as opposed to doing the mitzvot in Eretz Yisrael. And we'll hopefully come back, we're going to come back to this idea in a little bit. Okay. So now just a little bit of history. We'll leave the sources for a minute and we'll come back to them. But what's interesting about Eretz Yisrael is also its geographic position. I'm not sure how many of us have ever really noticed, but the geographic position, the location of Israel is in a very interesting place. Chazal call it the navel of the world, that essentially Israel is in the absolute middle. How so? We call it the Middle East, but it's actually the most central position on the globe in that it joins 3 continents. It joins Europe, Asia, and Africa. Plus it has a coast, so that allows us to reach other nations as well. And the thought is that Eretz Yisrael has been situated so centrally. Why? So that we could be a model society for other nations of the world to learn from, right? The idea that we're so central, the idea that people pass through Israel, they come through Israel. We know that we've been, throughout the generations, a tremendously important point. This is how we are going to be able to influence the world. So now, if you look, I'm taking you back to your source sheet for a minute. If you look in in Devarim, source number 8. Yeah, source number 8. So the idea that all the other nations are going to come into contact with Bnei Israel in their land, and they're going to see that this is not just a regular people. This is not just an average kind of a people. This is some nation that's very, very special. And another source in Devarim above it, right on number 7, when we do our mitzvot, when we practice the mitzvot the way they're supposed to be, when we set up our nation according to the laws of the Torah, what's going to happen? We're going to be fulfilling our mission of Am Nivchar, our mission of being the chosen people, and it's going to be broadcast to the world. Look at Devarim, chapter 4, in source number 7. Ushmartem asitem, ki hi chochmatchem ubinatchem le'nei ha'amim. You should do the mitzvot. The Torah is encouraging us, as Moshe is speaking to us and telling us that's going to be your sign of how wise the people you are. Nations of the world are going to see Bnei Israel in Eretz Yisrael practicing the Torah according to the way it was meant to be, and they're going to say, wow, this is a very wise nation, and they're going to actually copy some of the things that we do. And I couldn't help, when I was preparing this class, actually, I couldn't help but think about what's going on today now in the world with the coronavirus, and how Israel, even at this time, is serving as an example to the world. Thank God we are, Baruch Hashem, doing the best that we can in this very difficult time, and Israel is doing tremendous work in this fight against the virus, and it's based on our values of preserving life, and our values of saying every person is b'tselem Elokim. And I know in the civilized world we take this for granted. Of course, everybody thinks that, but we have to remember that all of Western society is really based on the Torah, and certainly America. When the founding fathers came to America and started to think about the values that they were going to build their country on, it goes back to the Old Testament. But that's just a tangent. So the way of life of the Jews in their land should be based on stakah mishpat, based on justice and righteousness. And when we establish this just society that takes care of the weaker members of society, that looks out for those who are vulnerable, we're going to become a paradigm for the whole world to copy. And this is also true when we talk about Mashiach, the idea that we're eventually leading to a time of Mashiach. This is our national mission that we actually say every single day. We say in Aleinu letaken olanu machut shakai v'chol bnei masai yikru b'shmecha. We say that one day the whole world is going to recognize God, and they're going to call on God and learn from the ways of the Jews. Let's actually look now at source number 9. Yeshaya describes Yemot HaMashiach beautifully when he says, "V'ya b'charit hayamim nachon yeh harbe et Hashem berosh ha'arim." All the nations are going to be focused and coming to Har HaBayit, which is where those of you who had the privilege of learning Midrash Eshel, you were able to just look out and see right then and there. V'halchu amim rabim ve'amru l'chu v'na'ale el har Hashem el bet Elokei Yaakov v'yorenu midrachav v'nelcha be'orchotav ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. Look at this. The nations of the world are going to be coming to Yerushalayim, coming and trying to learn. Yorenu midrachav means they're going to learn from the Jewish people, because from Sion, from Yerushalayim is where the Torah and the values of the Torah are going to be spread out. So I guess the question is that I wonder if all of you are thinking about, how could this be done without our own land? It would be that much more difficult to try to spread our world message and give out our values to the world without a land. So the land is there to help us, to aid us in our national mission of being an Am Nivchar, being a light unto the nations, so that other nations will be able to learn from us. Okay. I wanna see if we can. I know we don't have a whole lot of time. I have to start to wind up soon, but There are two thoughts I want to leave you with that are really important. Okay, I'm going to skip. I want to tell you about Rav Amital. Jessica's laughing. I want to tell you about Rav Amital. Rav Amital was the head of one of the two Rashi Yeshiva of Yeshivat Gush Etzion. He himself was a Holocaust survivor. And he speaks about the significance, religious significance of Eretz Yisrael. There are a few fun facts I want to share with you, and I'm not sure if you know them. The first thing that he says, he has a few here that point to the amazingness of the miracle of the birth of Israel. The first thing he says is that the UN decision to establish the Jewish state was the first time that both the East and the West, East and Western powers, worked together. They didn't work together before on any other issue. This was the only one where the decision was made to allow the Jews to go back and establish a Jewish state. So this idea, we take it for granted now in retrospect, but it's crazy. It's not even something normal that we could ever imagine. The idea that all these nations that never worked together before suddenly agreed, oh yes, the Jews should return and they should have their state. So that in and of itself is miraculous. And anybody who studied the modern history of Israel knows that the War of Independence was absolutely beyond anything that anybody could imagine as a military victory. A few Holocaust survivors with weapons that hardly worked, that they gathered from who knows where against 5 organized armies who were totally capable of wiping us out in no time. And yet we somehow got through that and we're able to start to establish our country. After the war, the waves of immigration. Does anybody ever think, Rabbi Amital says, these countries that were so anti-Israel, all these the Arab countries that worked so hard to stop Jewish immigration, all of a sudden allowed the Jews to emigrate? It was, as he puts it, an unfathomable irony, the idea that now Jews could come in. But this was the beginning of settling the land. Having these immigrants was part of what allowed us to start to build our country. And that was followed later on by immigration from communist countries, unheard of. The 6-Day War. I mean, we can go on, and then we come to today where Rabbi Amital described how our military, our scientific, our economic strength, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that we were able to get to such a point. And he points to the pasuk in Hallel, when it comes to Yom Haasmaut, which is the topic of our discussion, and the religious significance of this day, the idea that we can get to this day, the idea that we can celebrate this day, is miraculous. Okay, so just in the few minutes that I have left, I'd like to see if we can continue on this discussion of the religious significance of Israel. Rambam in Hilchot Melachim in chapter 11, when he's talking about the idea of Yemot HaMashiach, we know that the Jewish majority is a precondition for the coming of Mashiach. So this idea that hopefully, I think now we're actually more than 50% of world Jewry living in Israel, or we're getting there. This is a precondition for Messianic times. Not that I'm advocating it, I'm just saying this is what is known to be a precondition. And another thing that is all the Eshel students on this chat, I think, will really appreciate. If you look at source 11, there's a beautiful pasuk that sits outside our square in Kikar Batei Machaseh, which is from the prophet Zechariah, who talks about what will be in the future in Acharei Tamim. If you could look at source number 11, Ko Amar Hashem Tzvakot, Od yeshvu zkenim uzkenot berchovot Yerushalayim, ish min shanto beyado merov yamim. Zechariah is describing a time where there's going to be older people sitting in the streets of Yerushalayim, and there's going to be kids that are going to be playing. And we all know when we got hit with the soccer ball in the head that we were very happy because of this pasuk. The idea that kids are playing in the streets of Yerushalayim. Anybody who wants to realize how amazing that nevuah is just has to think back or look back at the pictures of Jerusalem from 100 years ago. when it was totally desolate, really desolate, and there was nothing, not what we see today there. So the idea that the Jews are returning to Eretz Yisrael, and this is again in Rav Amital's thought, that the Jewish majority is here, that the children have returned to play in the streets of Yerushalayim according to the prophecy of Zechariah. The Nevi'im are coming true. There are many more Pesukim. I can't bring them all now, but Yechezkel talks about the idea that the land is going to give forth its fruit when Bnei Israel return, and anybody who's been to Israel understands that the world here, the land here is full of so much produce and so much growing here. So these are all signs that the Nevuot are coming true, not least of which is Yirmiyahu's famous Od Yishama B'arei Yehuda V'chutzot Yerushalayim Kol Sasan V'Kol Simcha. There's life here. Thank God my son, by the way, just got married 3 weeks ago, right here in the coronavirus. Thank God there's life here, there's weddings here, there's growth here. And what we conclude from all of this, according to Rabbi Amital, is that we're getting closer. We're getting closer to the Geula. Of course, we still need. There's much more work to do, and the spiritual awakening that has to happen is still underway. But we're getting there, and looking at Eretz Yisrael and the miracle of what it is and what it's accomplishing. I don't know. For me, it's hard because I see it so clearly. But I know there are some people that look at it and just say, "Oh, it's just an amazing country." But I think when you study the Nevi'im and you see it really coming alive in front of you, I'll leave you with one other thought, and that's the thought of Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein, who is the other head of Yeshivat Gush Etzion. He talks about the uniqueness of living in Eretz Yisrael, and it really resonated with me. He has a few points where he talks about the idea that there's a certain vitality here. You know, the people say when they get to Israel, they feel like alive, right? This idea of the vitality of Jewish life here, where we're building a nation. The sense that there's a total community here, and the idea that we're standing in God's presence here. The Rav Lichtenstein speaks about this idea that we're standing lifnei Hashem in this special place. And not to say that if we're not living in Israel, we're not standing before Hashem. I would not want to say that. What he's trying to say is that there is a very special providence on Eretz Yisrael. I don't know if I brought you this pasuk of where it says, let me just see if I brought it for you. I don't know. I just want to see if you have it. Yeah, if you look in source 10, we're closing up here, but look in source 10 from Sefer Devarim. Eretz asher Hashem lokecha doresh ota tamid, enei Hashem lokecha ba mereshit hashana ve'ad acharit hashana. So this idea that God's presence, even though God obviously is watching over all 8 billion people and the whole world, there is a special hashgacha, there's a special attention that is given to Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Lichtenstein basically concludes that you want to make history, come to Israel. It's the epicenter of Jewish life. This is where there is religious value, even to the mundane things. And so, just to bring everything to a conclusion, I would say that even if one isn't able to live in Eretz Yisrael, we still have to feel, and this is the Rav speaking actually, Rav Lichtenstein, we still have to feel an emotional and a halachic and an essential pull to Eretz Yisrael, meaning even if we can't get there yet, we have to remember that this is our natural homeland. This is where we're meant to be. We're going to end with Rav Kook because I can't end without Rav Kook, but he's saying something amazing, Rav Lichtenstein. He says, there are some people that say, well, better not to think about it or not to even have it as a goal because I can't fulfill it anyway. And he says it's better to have yearning and aspiration as opposed to minimalist aspirations and maximal contentment. What does that big statement mean? That it's better to hope for Israel. It's better to strive to get there. Better than saying, all right, I'm where I am and that's it, and there's nothing else. Strive to get there, strive to be there. Because that is what shapes our lives and shapes our values. Okay, we're gonna end because I don't want to get in trouble. we're going to end with Rav Kook. So if you look at the last page of the sources, there you see a picture of Rav Kook in his earlier days, and he writes about and Rav Kook, everybody knows, is the first chief rabbi of Eress Yisrael and the father of religious Zionism. And he writes about the fact that Eress Yisrael is not, contrary to what we said earlier in the shiur, Eress Yisrael is not like a means to an end. It's not something, as he says here, external. We're going to read it in a second. Ella, he says, this is a part and parcel of Am Yisrael. You can't divide. Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael are one. So let's just look at his quick description here of the land of Israel. The land of Israel is not some external entity. It is not merely an external acquisition for the Jewish people. It's not merely a means of uniting the populace, meaning the opinion that was put forth that Israel is a refuge for all of the Jews. It's not just that. It's not merely a means of strengthening our physical existence, and it's not even merely a means of strengthening our spiritual existence. Rather, he says, Rav Kook, the land of Israel has an intrinsic meaning. It is connected to the Jewish people with the knot of life. Its very being is suffused with extraordinary qualities. The extraordinary qualities of the land of Israel and the extraordinary qualities of the Jewish people are two halves of a whole. So I think Rav Kook says it absolutely the best, this way of describing Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael as one, indivisible. It's not possible to separate them. So my big hope and my bracha to everybody, I like to end every shiur with some bracha, is that we all strive to, if not get here one day, hopefully we all will get here one day, but at the very least to make Israel a part of every aspect of who we are, to remember that wherever we live, and as wonderful as it is, and the communities that we're building, and we have to build those communities, to know that there's an ultimate home to where we are all going, and to be part of the national mission that we're all involved in, of being the Am Nivchar that we're supposed to be a light unto the nations. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I look forward to hearing the stories of how each and every one of you will God willing, accomplish that speedily in our days. Yom Haasmaut Sameach. I enjoyed learning with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Tawil.
Thank you, Miriam.
Guys, so
Thank
nice
you,
to
Mrs.
have
Tawil.
you. So nice to have you.